Having a lot of villagers is one of the most important things in Minecraft because it will allow you to trade with them for super strong items, like for example, this complete set of diamond armor. So, in this guide, I will tell you everything you need to know about villager breeding in Minecraft, and of course, how you can build this super OP villager auto breeder producing dozens of villagers per hour. Let's get right into it. But alright, before we get into the building, I would like to take a minute to talk about how villager breeding in Minecraft actually works, because in most videos, this part is just never explained. So, here we go. First of all, if you want to build a villager breeder, then I would recommend staying at least 80 blocks away from any villagers around you, just to make sure that the villager AI doesn't have any weird ideas. As for the breeding itself, of course you do need 2 villagers, and in order for these 2 villagers to be able to reproduce, there are 2 conditions that need to be met. On the one hand, the villager needs to have enough food in their inventory. To be more precise, they need to have at least 3 bread or 12 carrots, potatoes, or beetroots in their inventory. If they have less than that, they cannot breed, which by the way is also the reason why every auto breeder needs the farmer type villagers, as they are the only ones who can produce food for themselves. If you have any other type of breeder, then you will have to constantly feed them yourself. That would be the first condition, making sure that they have enough food. And secondly, you need to make sure that there are also enough free beds around, because the total number of villagers in an area can never be higher than the number of beds. So, for example, if you wanted 2 villagers to make a baby, then you need to have at least 3 beds, 2 for the parents, and then a third one to be populated with the baby. This, by the way, also means that with only 3 beds, 2 villagers can have a maximum of only 1 baby, and after that they will not produce any more unless the baby dies, is taken far enough away, or of course you build more beds. And with all that being said, let's now take a look at how you build this beautiful auto breeder. Before that though, it would be really cool if you could give a quick like to the video, because it helps me so much with the YouTube algorithm getting my guides out to more people. Thank you so much for your support. But alright, let's now talk about how you can build that perfect villager breeder for yourself. First of all, I gotta say, in most other YouTube videos, the creators start building the breeder at ground level and then dig a couple of blocks down for the mechanisms that are underground, which, by the way, if that's what you want to do, it's perfectly fine. Just saying, for the sake of this video, I will start building my breeder 2 blocks above the ground, just so that everything that happens under it is easier for you to see in the video. Now, as we just said, if we want to build an automated breeder, then we need to start by building a farm, because only farmer-type villagers can produce food for themselves. So, what we do right here is start by building a farm. The one that I do here in the video is 7 by 7 blocks, but you don't need to do it exactly like that. You could make it a bit bigger, you could also make it smaller. The only important thing is that the 2 villagers we're going to put inside here later will be able to grow enough food for themselves. But yeah, once we're done with the 7 by 7 blocks of dirt, we of course need a water source, otherwise we can't grow anything. And the way you do it is of course completely up to you. You could just dig a hole and put water in. But I think one very clever way to go about it would be using a block of tree leaves and then putting the water into that, because that will bind the water in the leaves, it won't run down, but it still hydrates all the farm blocks around it. And of course, speaking of farm blocks, up next we take a hoe and turn all that dirt into farmland. Once that's done, we're gonna build a wall around this farm, and on one side we're gonna leave a little gap. This will later be where the baby villagers go through. Now, on the other side of that gap, we're gonna create an additional little room where we're gonna place down beds. This is important because if there are not enough beds around, villagers can't breed. In order for this to work, you need to have at least 3 beds, 2 for the parents, and then a third one for them to even be able to create a baby. But if you want to make sure that they can produce even more babies, you can also add more beds, as many as you like. Then a small but very important step, in that 1 block corridor leading from the farm to the bedroom, you want to create a hole and surround it with trapdoors just like you see in the background. Make sure to do it exactly like I did here, because this way the adult villagers get blocked by the trapdoor so they can't get into the beds, but because the baby villagers are only 1 block high, they fit under the trapdoor, and when they try to get into the bed, they will fall into the hole from where we're later going to be able to take them. And just for clarification, right here you see how the trapdoors block the adults from getting into the bed at night, as well as the baby passing by under the trapdoor and falling into the hole. Now, finally, we of course need to make sure that we have enough light, on the one hand so that crops can grow, but also to make sure that no zombies are spawning in our villager breeder. That would be pretty bad. And also here, you're free to do the light however you want. You could use a glowstone block in the middle of the farm, you could use anything you like, but of course the simplest way is to just, put down a couple of torches on the walls. So, now that our farm and the bedroom are done, let's get to the most important step, and that is, of course, get 2 villagers into the farm to start the whole process. First of all, to turn the villagers into farmers, we're gonna need 2 composters who could just build them into the wall like I do right here. And now, all you really need to do is build a little staircase of temporary blocks on the outside, and that will then make the villagers automatically go into the farm and start working the field. Alternatively, what you can also do is put them in a boat or a minecart and drag them into the farm manually. That also works, so do whatever you're most comfortable with. Oh yeah, and I totally forgot to mention, pretty obvious actually, you need to of course plant food in the farm for them. Right here I'm using carrots, but potatoes and beetroot also work. And now your villager autobreeder is theoretically ready to go. Just one more thing, if you want to speed up the process, then you can also throw a bunch of food in to make the villagers start breeding right away. However, with the breeder part done, there is one last very important step that we haven't talked about just yet, and that is what actually happens when the babies fall down the hole that we dug. How we're gonna pick them up? Well, that is actually quite simple. First of all, we want to make sure that wherever they drop down, there is a water stream that automatically transports them away. This right here in the background is one example of how you could do it. And then, at the end of the water stream, you're really free to do whatever you like. You could, for example, build a temporary room where the villagers will wait until they grow up to adulthood. You could also use a boat with a lead to drag them away, or alternatively, a minecart rail, like you see in the background right now, also works perfectly fine. The only thing that you gotta make sure is that over time you transport the newly created villagers away, because if there are too many around the breeder, then at some point they will just stop breeding because the maximum population based on the beds has been reached. Now, this would be a setup for a standard villager autobreeder producing a handful of villagers per hour, but we can do so much more here. If you wanted to, then you can take this entire concept and build it into a tower like I show in the background right here, and depending on how high you make it, you will get dozens upon dozens of new villagers per hour. However, there are some important details that you shouldn't miss. See, I've made this video in a way that when you want to build this as a spawning tower, then all you need to do is just take the entire farm we just built in the previous chapter and put it on top without any changes. You can then stack it as high as you want. You also don't need to worry about fall damage because there is water at the bottom, so your baby villagers will not get hurt. The only thing that is very, very important here is that each layer of the tower must be 3 blocks high inside. Yes, villagers can stand in just 2 blocks of height, but if the interior space is less than 3 blocks high, then the villagers won't accept your beds, and that means they can't reproduce. Now, very important, because a lot of players still have problems making these villager autobreeders work, let's also real quick go over the most common issues so you don't make them for yourself. The first one that often happens is the villagers start to breed, but then they get angry and don't produce a baby. This usually happens when there are not enough beds around, or at least not enough beds that the villagers can see, and in this case you either gotta move away some of these successfully produced villagers in order to lower the population count, or what you could also do is build a ring around the main farm area of the tower, and in that ring you just put down more beds for the villagers to be able to produce more babies. Very important here though, villagers can't see the beds that are on other levels of the tower, so if you want to go for this method, you gotta repeat it for every single layer. And then lastly, apparently for some players there is an issue where the babies just don't find their way into the hole, and if that's the case for you, then one thing you can try is take the block in front of the hole and replace it with something that is not farmland. From what I've heard, this might help the villagers to actually pathfind to the beds. And if you want to see how to make a huge trading hall for all those villagers, then there will be a link right here once that video goes live. So sub to the channel if you want to see that day one. Welcome to the crew and see you next time.